negotiation.
Hello, I'm Jack Blanchard.
And I'm Dasha Burns. It is Tuesday, July 8th.
And this is the Playbook Podcast. Good morning, Dasha.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am good. I'm good. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. We were saying yesterday morning, everything's going so well for Donald Trump this last few weeks. He's not really going to just mess it up by blowing up the economy again, is he? And yesterday he kind of went and did it a little bit.
But like with a little more time.
Right, there's always a little more time. The stock market's not overly thrilled, though, I have to say. Obviously, the big story that everyone was talking about yesterday, and certainly we'll be talking about today as well, Dasha, the announcement of tariffs of at least 25% on 14 different countries, but the deadline's been moved from tomorrow all the way back to the 1st of August. And is that really a deadline? Do we really know? I'm not sure it is.
Well, and he was asked, is there room for negotiation? And he said, no, we sent these letters. There were letters. He posted them on Truth Social. He said, no, this is it. But then he said, well, but yeah, maybe there's some negotiations. So, I mean, look, we have been on this roller coaster time and again. And so I am curious to see how this plays in the stock market, because at this point, this is the pattern, and that's kind of starting to get priced in a little bit. So this is just the classic Trump move here, right? Like, what else were we expecting?
It's the classic Trump move, but is it really effective? I just think if you want to get people to invest and build factories in America, then constantly moving the goalposts all the time, like what business is going to be like, right, yep, that's it, we definitely need to build our factory in America. Like, no, because next week is going to be a whole different story again, and the week after, who knows?
Exactly. I mean, the uncertainty is just not good for business, but he thinks it is good for negotiating. And in some cases it has been, but it's a state that you can't live in forever if you are a business or if you're a consumer too. And he really does want to see revenue via these tariffs. Like, that's the thing. It's been like this yes and thing. They think they can do both. They think that they can change the way the U.S. trades with the world and negotiate and get good deals. And the deadline to see whether that comes to fruition keeps getting pushed.
It certainly does. So expect plenty of chatter about that today. The other story that we had some chatter about yesterday in Play, but we've got a bit more this morning, looking back at the 2024 election campaign. There's this book out today by Josh Dorsey, Tyler Page, and Isaac Arnstorff, three well-known White House correspondents, 2024, how Trump retook the White House and the Democrats lost America. There's loads of new gear in it, and they've been very kindly throwing a few bits Playbook's way to include it in the newsletter. The stuff we got this morning is actually about the Kamala Harris.
That they riled up on this stuff that actually, like, no, you guys, I swear, like, we went in and we looked.
And it's not just them. People are resurfacing J.D. Vance tweets from a few years ago. He dipped his toe into all this and started stirring up, saying, isn't this guy died mysteriously? We just don't talk about it. Again, playing to that base. I don't know what he really believed, whether he was really believed these conspiracies or not, but whatever. He was playing that game, and it's coming back to bite him now. People are resurfacing it, and the rage is there. Pat Bondi, as you say, really leaned into it hard. We're going to come into the DOJ. We're going to reveal the truth. Now she's got nothing to reveal, and MAGA people are calling for her to be fired immediately, right?
Yeah, Laura Loomer texted me saying Blondie, that's her nickname for Bondi, should be fired, saying she's lying to the American people, saying she's trying to protect herself. This is somebody that has a huge following, and as you said, Loomer is by no means alone here, and how they try to put out this MAGA firestorm, I don't know.
The reason I really wanted to talk about this in the podcast today is not just because it's interesting to see this sort of implosion happening, but I think it's actually really important for a couple of reasons. The first is turnout in the 2026 election is absolutely crucial to who is going to win in the midterms, right? This is the kind of thing that depresses your base.
Well, and a lot of these people were not regular voters to begin with. They were low propensity folks that got invested because they kind of went down the rabbit hole on these ideas and got them into politics.
Right. But the disappointment that you see in all these messages just sounds like people who are just that little bit less likely to go and vote for these guys that were supposed to be going and fixing all these things that they're so upset about. The other thing they want to talk about was listening to Donald Trump in the White House last night when Netanyahu was with him at the start of that dinner. He was being asked about Ukraine. Now, it's a completely different issue, obviously, but a really important one. There's some links here because a week or so ago, the Pentagon suddenly stopped weapons shipments to Ukraine unannounced, saying that we're reconsidering how many weapons stockpiles we've got. We can't do this. Obviously, in Kyiv, they're outraged. They're getting bombed every night in their residential areas now by Putin. Turns turns out, the Wall Street Journal reports last night that Donald Trump was not across that decision and wasn't happy about it, and told Zelensky on a phone call at the end of last week that he wasn't happy about it and that he was going to restart weapons shipments. In the White House on camera last night, he came out saying they have to be able to defend themselves, they're getting hit very hard, we're going to have to send them more weapons, I'm not happy with Putin. This is probably the most pro-Zelensky Ukraine stuff we've ever heard from Donald Trump, and he is in the process of potentially reversing that decision. Now, that decision was being cheered by the MAGA faithful who want America to stop sending stuff to Ukraine, and suddenly here again we see the president going against what the MAGA faithful want on one of these core issues, and it is going to upset people.
No, they're not going to be happy, but this is kind of the only way that Trump has thought about dealing with Putin at this point. I interviewed Marco Rubio. He said they're not ready for sanctions just yet. We know that the president is upset. So next step, let's not punish Russia, but let's arm Ukraine. Now, this is an issue that has actually divided the Republican Party. I remember I went with former Vice President Mike Pence, then candidate Mike Pence, to Ukraine. He was there trying to take a stand when Trump was saying this is absolutely not something that we should get involved with. And there are Republicans.
In my tenure, you basically keep growing and get to the other side.
Which is why we have heard Johnson and others say failure is not an option here, right?
Yeah.
They just got to get to the other side, as you say. So let's assume it becomes law. Now, tell me, does this become the centerpiece of the conversation with the American people for the 26 midterms?
If it doesn't, we're fools. As I've argued before, the bills should be just captured. Tax cuts for the wealthy, healthcare cuts for the many. People get that. It's already underwater. There's nothing about reducing healthcare benefits for working people that is going to make it more popular. And the way I would sharpen this, two examples, not just to use rhetoric. I mean, and when the bill is on the floor in the Senate, Jeff Bezos is having a $50 million wedding in Venice. He's going to get massive tax cuts. Not that he needs it to afford the wedding. And close to 20 million people are going to lose their health care. That should have been the image. Another way of doing this was at a podium at a press conference, portraits of every wealthy person who attended the Trump inaugural, a portrait of them, their net worth below them, and 40 kids on the other side of the podium. And say, these children want to see their pediatrician. These guys are going to get a tax cut that they don't even know they're going to get, but their accountants will. Now, I think these kids are more important for America's future than these billionaires. But the contrast is the core crux of this argument for Democrats.
And as you noted, the bill is already underwater, so I feel like your side has sort of a head start to this argument that you're making here now.
Yeah. That doesn't mean you win, but we are being spotted 20 yards here.
But that's what I want to ask you, though, because you can start sensing how Republicans are going to argue this, because they understand that they have a sales job with the American people, right? They're going to focus on what they think are some popular measures in this bill, like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and making the argument that what's wrong with saying that able-bodied Americans should have to work to get benefits, and that has some resonance with the American people. So what about how the Republicans may sell this do you think Democrats have to be most concerned about?
Well, we got to go hit this bill hard for what it does. And you don't have to make it up. It's right there in print. It's all been headlined, and it's more than headline, the argument. Second, David, your argument is correct at a macro level. This is a fight in about 40 congressional districts and about 3 or 4 Senate districts. The fight is not for public opinion. The fight is for the public opinion of independent swing voters. The reason these districts are swing, they have a higher concentration of swing voters. So what moves that voter? Now, to me, the crux argument beyond the bill, step back, is corruption, cruelty, and chaos. And the corruption is not just the way the elite understand it. The corruption comes in many ways around the way the public understands it, which is the Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook, Elon Musk get a tax cut. They don't deserve it. They didn't even ask for it. It's so massive. And all these kids are getting healthcare cuts. That is the corruption where they know that this system is self-dealing in the self-interest of the well-connected. So, and in those districts, independents are aligned with Democrats in a mirror image of this bill. Yes, they'll talk about interest rate deduction on car loans or tips, etc. But that's not in a swing district. I'm also making a generalization of the 40 plus that are in play. That's not what's going to move them. And it's going to be what Republicans did here. And what's ironic, and it's kind of what really is in a more, not just about the politics of the bill. The Republicans candidates focused on the core things, middle class economics, middle class values, are winning. And we didn't.
Let's start with a small number that has big consequences. The total fertility rate. It measures how many babies on average each woman will have over her lifetime. And for a population to remain stable, flat, no growth, no decline, women on average have to have 2.1 kids.
So you need to replace yourself, you need to replace a partner, and you need a little extra for mortality.
That's Philip Levine. He studies population trends at Wellesley College. And he says this number has been falling in high-income countries, including the U.S.
We're at 1.6, which we're worried about at 1.6. South Korea is at 0.7. There's just, relatively speaking, no children being born in South Korea.
To understand what a total fertility rate of 0.7 means for South Korea, you just have to project it forward across a lifetime.
If you take 100 young people today, when they get to be, the age of typical grandparents, those 100 people will have 12 grandchildren.
12 grandchildren for every 100 South Korean grandparents. Of course, this is unfolding more slowly in the U.S. than in South Korea, but if it continues, it could remake society in all kinds of ways. Consider this. The birth rate is falling fast in the U.S., and it's driving a new political debate about what, if anything, can be done about it. From NPR, I'm Ari.
Have no children at all. A study released last month by the U.S. Census found that people over 65 now outnumber children in 11 states, and that's up from just 3 states where that was true 5 years ago. Emma Waters is with the conservative-leaning Heritage Foundation, and she's been thinking about this.
It means that we're going to have more adults than we have children to replace them, and that will heavily impact things like our military readiness, our overall GDP and economic growth in the United States.
Waters thinks that without more babies, the U.S. will struggle to do basic things like funding Social Security.
If you don't have enough workers, you won't have enough people to actually support older generations and those who are aging now.
So now some of the country's most high-profile conservatives, including Trump, Elon Musk, and Vice President J.D. Vance, say they want to reverse this trend. Here's Vance speaking at the March for Life earlier this year.
So let me say very simply, I want more babies in the United States of America.
There's a pattern here, of course. Virtually all of the attention so far to falling birth rates in the U.S. is coming from political figures on the right.
Ruth Bronstein is a sociologist at Johns Hopkins, and she studies right-wing rhetoric.
There's claims that we are experiencing a fertility crisis, and they are looking at data that is real and legitimate data that shows declining birth rates in the United States and really around the world.
But Bronstein thinks some far-right politicians are keying into this question about babies and birth rates because of other big demographic